there comes into its operation that which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermeticists use the term. It is this law of compensation to which the Kybalion refers when it says, "The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates." The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction, or to the opposite pole. The one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see many examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tides follow the same law. And the same law is manifested in all the phenomena of rhythm. The pendulum, with a short swing in one direction, has but a short swing in the other, while the long swing to the right invariably means the long swing to the left. An object hurled upwards to a certain height has an equal distance to traverse on its return. The force with which a projectile is sent upward a mile is reproduced when the projectile returns to the earth on its journey. This law is constant on the physical plane, as a reference to the standard authorities will show you. But the Hermeticists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling little joy. The pig suffers but little mentally and enjoys but little. He is compensated. And, on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, but whose nervous organism and temperament cause them to suffer quite exquisite degrees of pain, and so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment But the Hermeticists carry it further still. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. The pig suffers but little mentally and enjoys but little. He is compensated. And on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, but whose nervous organism and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain. And so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment, but also the most intense suffering. The rule is that the capacity for pain and pleasure in each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. But the Hermeticists go still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far, proportionally, toward the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent to the positive in this matter. That is to say, that experiencing a certain degree of pleasure in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure is the rhythmic swing, according to the law of compensation, for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or in a previous incarnation. This throws a new light on the problem of pain. The Hermeticists regard the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one of life of the individual. The Hermeticists regard the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one life of the individual, so that in consequence, the rhythmic swing is understood in this way. While it would be without meaning unless the truth of reincarnation is admitted. But the Hermeticists claim that the master or advanced student is able, to a great degree, to escape the swing toward pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned. By rising on to the higher plane of the ego, much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noted that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and have a bit of the cake at the same time. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. The thing that one gains are always paid for by the things that one loses. The rich possess much that the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond the reach of the rich. The millionaire may have the inclination towards feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all of the dainties and luxuries at the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He even envies the appetite and digestion of the labourer who lacks the wealth and inclinations. He envies the appetite and digestion of the labourer who lacks the wealth and inclinations of the millionaire, and who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could obtain, even if his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined, for the wants, habits, and inclinations differ. And so it is through life. The law of compensation is ever in action, striving to balance and counterbalance, and always succeeding in time, even though several lives may be required for the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm. Thank you for listening to yet another episode. I hope you enjoyed that. So next week we have coming up for you Chapter 12, Causation. And just to give a little synopsis or my own thoughts on Chapter 11, Rhythm. So one of the things that really struck me during the reading of this particular chapter was, some days I've literally felt this unfold within the day. Like generally your mood is stable enough and you just go about your day. But sometimes I've felt that if you get a big peak, all of a sudden some days, like, it can be like a roller coaster, and you're just like, what is going on? Like, had the best morning, everything was so wonderful, and now why am I just feeling so the opposite way all of a sudden? And I've had that happen a couple of times in a day, not regularly, but you know, sometimes it happens. And it just reminds me of this particular chapter, rhythm. And again, there's other times as well where when you're conscious and where you're aware of what's going on, that you can really try and lift yourself up to that higher plane and watch your emotions. And this is something else that I often try if I'm upset. Sometimes, you know, you can't, you just get caught up in it. But that's the whole learning and the experience, is that you get better with each time you practice. So sometimes you can just imagine yourself above it and looking down. And it does feel different than if you just allow yourself to experience those emotions firsthand. And then other times you get totally caught up in your emotions, and you know, you can't observe them from that separate place. But that's what it's all about, and that's the learning. And this chapter tells you that when you're in the highs, you can enjoy them, you can have fun. And when the lows are coming, or when it's, you know, the opposite end of the polarity, perhaps the level of polarity that you'd prefer not to feel, remember you can separate yourself. You can go above to the higher plane and you can just watch it. And therefore you can miss the pendulum swing in the opposite direction. You can neutralize it. So really great information. You know, I've done this in my own life and it can definitely be applied, and it definitely does help. And it's just about continuing to practice it and getting better and better at it. Because who doesn't want to be able to be in control of those swings and emotions and know, okay, I'm going to detach now, because it's what's going to make everything be smoother. And also another point that they brought up was that we accumulate these things throughout our many lives. Perhaps karma might be akin to a word that could be used to describe this. So you have your lifetimes of rhythm stored up. So if something really negative happened to you, perhaps in an all lifetime, and you had a swing to the polarity, you know, on the negative end of the scale, then having a really big influx of happy emotions, that could be down to, you know, a past negative thing. And to even remember that if you have a down day or something happens, to know that that pendulum is going to swing back in the opposite direction for you. As we know, life is full of ups and downs, and that's what makes you enjoy the ups, is that you have context with all of it. You know, we wouldn't know what an up was if we didn't have downs, as much as nobody wants them. That's the truth of the matter. So thank you for joining me. It's been my pleasure as always, and I appreciate every single one of you watching. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Adios.